very sorry for that. You're right. So imagine you guys are going to Starbucks with your friends. You're just sitting down, and you're there for a business meeting, and the guy hasn't arrived yet. It takes 10 minutes. You're sitting there, you haven't ordered anything, you're not disturbing anyone. And then the police arrive. They don't ask any questions. They just look in your general direction, and they handcuff you. So this is something that happened a month ago to two black individuals who were there for a business meeting. Funny enough, the guy who they were waiting for finally did arrive and confronted the police about it. They didn't say anything, they just dragged him off. So, what I'm going to be talking about is that racism still exists in the United States to this day, even if we try to ignore it. And these are mostly shown in 3 different cases. There's police bias, there's the prejudice and stereotypes that society has placed on blacks and other colored individuals, and also there's subconscious bias or implicit bias that most people have in society. So I'm going to start with the police bias. So there was a study done by NBC News that went over the 2015s, that looked at the police records of 2015. Out of all the people that the police fatally shot, there were mainly blacks, Latinos, people of minorities. And what this study showed is that out of all of those people that they killed were less likely to be armed than the white people that they did shoot. There was also civilian testimonies that state that the way that the police handled the situation was not that it was purely based on bias. Whenever they saw a person of color, they would automatically assume the worst and draw their weapon. Whether they had a cell phone or they had just, like a simple, any other electrical appliance, or like they just couldn't see what the person was holding, they would just assume the worst in them and, well, fire, as it were. There was also testimony from the NBC number cruncher, who also agreed that, police used bias way too much in their arrests. And this isn't just talking about like white cops, like this is like just all the cops in general. Even cops of color are trained to see people of color as a bigger threat than the white man. The white individual. So from that, I'm going to go into the stereotypes and the prejudice that people of color face in society. So we have another study done in Chicago. This is 2016, that shows that, it states that out of everything there, society tends to use excessive force against people of color. And they also deny them certain types of jobs and opportunities that a stereotypical white person might have. I feel like I'm reading that way too much. No, white people. Anyway, so another thing that the study showed was that in Chicago, the police also tended to, place people of color as bad people. Also as like not trustworthy individuals. Like for one instance, there was. You guys all know that police stop people of color like every day, right? There are like there's a statistic that shows that people of color are like twice as likely to get stopped by police just because of their skin color and where they live. I had a friend actually. Let's call him Dylan. He lives in Mayfair, he used to live in Mayfair where I lived, and we were both just running towards. I was running towards school, and I was running late. So he offered me a ride. He could drive at that point. And as we were going, we were going kind of fast, I guess, because I was late. A police just came up behind us and stopped us and said, "So why are we going so fast?" We just responded with, "Oh, we're late to school. I'm late to school, and he's driving me there." And then he told us to get out of the car. So what he did was that he rummaged through the entire car, basically opening every cabinet, throwing stuff all over the place. And then when he didn't find anything, he was looking for, which I'm pretty sure you guys can guess, it's drugs. Because that's what most people think when they say, "Hey, that guy lives in the ghetto, probably has drugs." So when he didn't find anything, he just didn't say anything, walked away, and drove off. I was 30 minutes late, by the way. And that right there showed to me that, wow, are we really stereotyped that badly? And this wasn't just an incident that happened to me or my friend or my other friends that I used to have. This happens on a large scale all over the United States. If I remember correctly, it's like 68%. No, it's like 60 or 70% of all colored individuals get stopped by a police just for being that color, and because they're usually associated with drugs, gangs, and as Trump would say it, rapists. Now from there we're gonna go sour note. We're gonna go to the subconscious bias. The subconscious bias actually influences both of the ones that I mentioned before. It influences the stereotyping and also the bias, which is why it's called subconscious bias. So what subconscious bias is, it's just like, when you imagine a white person, how fast do thoughts of educated, good, wealthy, healthy, or You know, just this typical good stuff. How fast does that come to mind? Compared to when you think of a black person or a Latino or a person of color. They actually did a test on this, and it said that like a good 90% of people who took the test associated people of color with evil or negative stuff, and they were statistically much likelier to associate good things faster with a person who was white. And that actually influences how they see everyone else around them. It's kind of like a gut reaction. Tim Wise, anti-racist activist, actually had this problem in the past before when he was going on a plane to Iowa, and he saw two black men who were gonna pilot the plane. You would think that an anti-racist activist would see this as a welcome sight. Unfortunately, no. His first thought was, "Oh God, I'm gonna die today." And as soon as he had that thought, he immediately just drove that thought to the back of his mind and said, "No, that is not it." But it was that point that he realized that he was already conditioned to think that way because of what media and what society teaches us. In conclusion, we're all racist on the inside, a little bit, even if we don't want to admit it. However, how far are you willing to take that racism is all entirely up to you. Thank you.
So Alex, what did you think?
So I thought the attention device was fine about the police arresting the men. I felt like you had a structured speech. You did cite your sources. And you did have slight pauses, but they weren't that distracting. And I felt as if in the beginning of your speech you didn't need to add what I'm going to be talking about. But I thought your speech was fine.
All right, the visualization that you have of the experience as your attention device is okay. Make sure that you are describing completely the event that you're describing. It sounded a little bit incomplete to me, different from what I had read about that event. So you want to make sure that you've got a citation, a quote that you can accurately reflect back to make sure that you're presenting it in the way that it actually happened. I thought that you did clearly state what your claim was. There was an explicit preview, so we know where you were headed during the presentation. Phrasing of the claim on police bias, I think, could be a little bit smoother. You make a reference to the NBC data on that first point, and that's okay. Although sometimes it gets summarized and presented in a partial manner, and there's one place where you're talking about the number cruncher and the inferences that particular person made, and that sounds to me like it's interpretive and not really about the numbers. If somebody's going to make a judgment based on the numbers, then that's their expertise that's doing so, and they should be quoted more directly. The bias issue, you claim that the police are trained to see people of color as being a bigger threat, and I'm going, well, you need to describe what that training consists of. That seems like a big assertion, and it seems like it contradicts the position that you have with the one piece of information that says the people that are most likely to be armed are the white folks. So that seems to me like, why would they teach people that the folks who are least likely to be armed are the ones that are most dangerous? There's got to be an explanation about that inconsistency, and you don't really attempt to explain that explanation, and I think that's a little bit problematic. The Chicago data is problematic. The citation is on this information is not very clear. The quotes are not very clear either. It sounds like you are paraphrasing, but not necessarily paraphrasing completely. And it gets referenced as the study. And then there's also some talk about jobs issues, which I think is not very clear, and how it's tied into your argument is a little bit different. You use the example of your own experience with a stop, which I think does add a little bit of interest to the presentation. The circumstances under which it's going, you describe to some degree. I don't know any other way to ask it except, what those circumstances were. I mean, you did admit that you were speeding. Did he ask to look in the car? That's one of those things that's a kind of a legal issue. I'm not exactly sure what the criteria is, but there are, it's like stopping you, getting you out of the car, not writing you a ticket, and searching the car. That sounds like a whole bunch of problems, and I'm not sure that those are endemic problems to the police department. That sounds like they're an endemic problem to that particular cop. So what you need is some more information on that sort of thing to back up. I'm not saying that you couldn't use the example. I'm just saying you need to make it more generalizable, and so we need some data on that particular point. There are times when you don't really look like you're very prepared to speak, a little informal. I think that's a little bit problematic. When you get to the subconscious bias, you're already with just a minute left, and you kind of run out of time, and you keep going. So all of that's in overtime. I think there's an argument to be made here and developed, but it feels a little bit underdeveloped, and I'm not exactly sure who Tim Weiss is and why his jumping to the conclusion that 2 black pilots is the day he's going to die. I think there's an argument that you're trying to get to here, that even somebody who is supposedly enlightened can have these kinds of impressions, but I didn't think it came across the way you meant it to. And you end up basically calling us all racist as you finish off your speech, which I think is not necessarily the way you want to do that. The argument that people might have racial bias, I think, is probably something that you could introduce at the start of that section, explain what that bias is likely to be, that it's unconscious and that it could have an effect on the way we act, instead of finishing with the, like the declarative statement that way, which is probably going to provoke people's, like we talked about reservation issues. They're going to say, well, I don't know what you're talking about, I'm not that kind of person, and they're going to dismiss what you're saying, when in fact what you're saying might be reflective of a lot of ways people do behave. All right, thank you.